Ladies and gentlemen, you can feel it, can't you? That quiet ache in the back of your mind when you agree to something you don't want. When you smile while your soul tightens. When you nod, but something deep inside you is shaking its head. That's the sound of betrayal, not from others, from yourself. And the worst part, you become so used to it, you call it being nice, responsible, or keeping the peace. But what peace are you keeping when you're at war with your own heart? You betray yourself when you lie to make others comfortable. You betray yourself when you shrink your truth to fit in. You betray yourself every time you pretend not to notice that small, whispering voice inside you, begging you to stop. Most people don't recognize self-betrayal because it wears a smile. It looks like compromise, but it tastes like poison. You were not born to perform. You weren't put on this earth to shapeshift into whatever the world needs you to be today. You're not clay for others to mold. You are fire, and fire cannot be tamed without dying out. The reason you feel empty is not because something is missing. It's because you keep abandoning yourself to be enough for everyone else. And here's the truth. You will never be enough for the world when you're not enough for yourself. So how do you stop betraying yourself? First, be willing to disappoint others before you disappoint yourself. That means saying no without apology. It means letting people misunderstand you, judge you, even walk away, and still standing firm in your own center. Second, listen to your gut, not your guilt. Guilt is often the echo of old programming trying to keep you small. But your gut, it's ancient wisdom, and it doesn't lie. Third, notice who benefits from your silence, your pretending, your self-abandonment. When you stop betraying yourself, people who loved your mask may leave. But those who love the real you will finally have a chance to arrive. You cannot build a life worth living while constantly tearing down your own truth. You must ask, who am I really beneath the roles, beneath the obligations, beneath the need to be liked? And once you touch that, even for a moment, you'll realize this whole time you were betraying a masterpiece for the comfort of a cage. This is your awakening. This is your return. Not to something new, but to what you always were before the world convinced you to be anything else. Stop betraying yourself. Start becoming yourself. And everything you've been chasing, it starts chasing you. The greatest betrayal isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with a knife in the back or shattered trust from someone close. No, the most damaging kind of betrayal is often silent. It happens in moments so subtle you barely notice, but you feel them. It's in the nod when your heart says no. It's in the laughter when your soul feels like crying. It's in the way you swallow your truth just to make others comfortable. And eventually, the cost isn't just emotional, it's existential. You begin to forget who you are underneath all the pretending. Self-betrayal isn't a single moment of weakness. It's a pattern, a habit, a slow erosion of your authenticity. It starts when you decide that your truth is too inconvenient, that your needs are too heavy, that your boundaries are too much. So you edit yourself, you mute your desires, you dim your light, and little by little you become a stranger to your own inner world. What makes this betrayal so dangerous is its invisibility. The world praises the polite, the agreeable, the adaptable. You're told to go with the flow, to not make a fuss, to be easygoing. And in the name of peace, you abandon yourself. But this isn't peace. It's quiet destruction. It's like suffocating slowly under a weighted blanket of expectations. You're alive, but not truly living. There is a unique pain that comes with knowing you are the one holding yourself back, that no one is stopping you, not really, but that you have built a prison out of your own compromises. You handed out keys to everyone else while locking the doors to your own needs. And you wonder why you feel resentful. You wonder why anxiety creeps in when you're alone. Because deep down, you know. You know that the real you is trapped beneath layers of performative behavior. You know that your silence isn't peace, it's self-erasure. Sometimes you excuse it. You tell yourself, I'm just being flexible, or it's not worth the fight. But every time you betray your own voice, you reinforce the belief that you're not worthy of being heard, that your truth is less valuable than someone else's comfort. And over time, that belief becomes a way of being. You move through life on autopilot, disconnected, unfulfilled, quietly bitter. You say you don't know what you want. But maybe the truth is, you stopped asking because you were tired of hearing a voice you weren't willing to honor. You can't keep living like this. At some point, you must pause and ask yourself, what parts of me have I silenced just to survive? What dreams did I abandon to make room for someone else's vision of me? Where did I begin shrinking myself so that others could feel tall? To stop betraying yourself, you have to become brutally honest. You have to admit the ways you've made yourself small, the truths you've buried, the boundaries you've blurred. It's not about blaming yourself, it's about reclaiming yourself. You can't heal what you pretend doesn't hurt. You can't grow into your full self while hiding parts of you in shame. You owe it to yourself to listen deeply, without judgment, to treat your inner truth not as a threat, but as a compass. Your authenticity is not a liability, it's your power. And once you stop silencing it, everything in your life begins to align differently. Opportunities feel more natural, relationships become more real, and most importantly, you feel more whole, not because everything outside you changed, but because you finally stopped abandoning what's inside. The world doesn't need another person playing a role. It needs someone brave enough to be real. So stop the quiet betrayal. Start the bold return. Because you are not meant to be a watered-down version of yourself. You are meant to be your full, unfiltered truth, and that begins by no longer being the one who walks away from your own soul. Every time you say yes just to keep the peace, you whisper a quiet no to your own inner stillness. You might not hear it at first. It's subtle. A slight tightening in your chest, a wave of fatigue that washes over you after agreeing to something you didn't want. That's not coincidence. That's your spirit reacting to the lie you just told, not a lie to someone else, but to yourself. You said yes to look agreeable, to be accepted, to avoid conflict. But in doing so, you disrupted the natural harmony within you. You disturbed your own peace. It's easy to confuse people-pleasing with kindness. To believe that saying yes to others, even when it hurts you, is somehow noble. But let's be honest. How noble is it to betray yourself in the name of appearances? How kind is it to suffocate your truth so someone else can breathe easier? That's not love. That's not humility. That's fear in disguise. It's the fear of rejection, the fear of being disliked, the fear of standing out. So you sacrifice your own needs, bit by bit, thinking that peace with others is worth the price of unrest within yourself. But real peace, deep, unshakable peace, doesn't come from agreement. It comes from alignment. And alignment requires honesty. It demands that you listen to your inner voice, even when it tells you what others don't want to hear, even when it disrupts the illusion of harmony. Because false peace is not peace at all. It's a fragile truce held together by your silence. And eventually that silence becomes unbearable. When you repeatedly say yes to things you don't want, you teach your nervous system that your comfort doesn't matter. You teach your heart that its desires are secondary. You train your mind to ignore the intuitive nudges meant to guide you, and worst of all, you create relationships built on performance instead of presence. The people around you don't know the real you, they know the agreeable version of you, the edited, softened, filtered version, who always says yes and never causes waves. But beneath that version is someone screaming to be heard. You don't need to be rude. You don't need to be harsh. But you do need to be clear. Clarity is kindness, not only to others, but to yourself. A firm no is more respectful than a dishonest yes, because a dishonest yes breeds resentment. It piles up under your skin like invisible debris until one day it erupts, not because of one big thing, but because of all the small things you didn't speak up about. That's how relationships fracture. That's how inner turmoil becomes external chaos. And saying no doesn't make you difficult. It makes you honest. It makes you someone who values their time, their energy, their emotional capacity. And it sets a standard. If you won't betray yourself, no one else is allowed to either. Boundaries begin with you. Respect begins with you. When you're faced with that moment, the familiar urge to say yes out of habit or fear, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, what do I really want? What will preserve my peace, not just my image? And then act from that place. It may be uncomfortable at first. You might disappoint some people. But in doing so, you'll stop disappointing yourself. You'll begin living in a way that honors your truth instead of hiding it. The world will always ask for more than you can give. That's not the problem. The problem is when you keep giving, even when it costs you your own well-being. There's a line where generosity ends and self-abandonment begins. And you know when you've crossed it, not because others tell you, but because your soul starts to ache. Your yes is sacred. Your time is sacred. Your energy is sacred. Don't waste it trying to be everything to everyone. Because when you say yes to please others, you say no to the very thing you're here to protect, your own peace. And no external approval will ever be enough to fill the void that self-betrayal leaves behind. So protect your peace like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. But fear is a quiet manipulator. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It wraps itself in reason, in politeness and responsibility. But beneath its careful disguise, it feeds the most dangerous pattern of all, lying to yourself. You tell yourself you're okay when you're not. You say something doesn't matter when it clearly does. You pretend you're fine staying silent, going along with things, dimming down just to avoid being seen as difficult. But what you're really doing is abandoning your truth to survive someone else's comfort. That's not growth. That's fear, shaping your life from the shadows. And it always begins innocently enough. A hesitation, a pause. You're about to speak your truth, set a boundary, say no, and then that inner voice chimes in. What if they get upset? What if they leave? What if they think you're selfish, dramatic, or too much? So you adjust, you shift, you water yourself down to be digestible. You lie not just in words, but in presence. You become someone who's easier to love at the cost of loving yourself. Fear tells you that your truth is a risk, that if you say what you really feel, everything will fall apart. But here's the paradox. The more you lie to yourself, the more things fall apart anyway. Not in explosions, but in the slow corrosion of your spirit. You start waking up tired, not just physically, but emotionally depleted. You start questioning your own desires, unsure if they're real or just reaction. Your self-trust erodes. because you stopped listening to your own intuition long ago. And what is intuition, really, but the voice of your soul? Fear disconnects you from that voice. It doesn't want you to trust it, because fear thrives in self-doubt. It wants you to outsource your worth, to rely on the opinions of others, the safety of the familiar, the illusion of control. It wants you to believe that speaking your truth is dangerous, but suppressing it is safe. And over time you internalize that idea so deeply, you forget that there was ever a choice. But there is always a choice. There is always that small, sacred moment between your feeling and your reaction. The moment where you can choose to listen instead of suppress, to honor instead of perform. It takes courage, real courage, not to let fear decide for you. Because the truth is, fear will always be present, but it doesn't have to be in charge. Ask yourself, how many times have you agreed to something just because you were afraid of disappointing someone? How often have you kept quiet because the idea of being misunderstood felt worse than being invisible? How many parts of yourself have you buried because the world told you they were too inconvenient? Fear is a master of negotiation. It will convince you to compromise, inch by inch, until you wake up one day and don't recognize the life you're living. It will offer you safety at the price of your freedom. But that kind of safety is a cage. It's comfort laced with anxiety. It's calm on the outside, but chaos within. The moment you start telling the truth to yourself, even if it's messy, even if it's painful, that's the moment you begin to reclaim your power. You start to feel solid again, not because the world approves, but because you do. Because your words, your choices, your actions start aligning with who you really are, not who fear trained you to be. You don't need to be fearless to live honestly. You just need to act despite the fear. You need to tell yourself the truth, especially when it's uncomfortable. That's how self-trust is rebuilt. That's how inner peace is restored. Not by being fearless, but by being brave. Stop lying to yourself to keep the peace. Stop hiding parts of you that are inconvenient to others. Fear may visit, but it doesn't get to make decisions anymore. Your truth matters more than their approval. Your peace matters more than their comfort. And your soul matters more than the illusion of being good. You were not born to live a life managed by fear. You were born to express, to expand, to evolve. That begins with one honest moment at a time. One brave decision to stop lying to yourself. Because freedom doesn't begin when the world accepts you. It begins when you do. Authenticity is not something you stumble upon. It is something you choose consciously, daily, even when it costs you. It's not soft or effortless. It's not just speaking your truth when it's convenient or when the room welcomes it with applause. Authenticity is often raw. It demands sacrifice. Because the moment you choose to live in alignment with who you really are, you must also let go of everything you built to survive as who you are not. That's where the pain begins, not in discovering your truth, but in detaching from the lies that once protected you. You've spent years crafting versions of yourself to fit, to please, to belong. Maybe you became the one who always says yes, the one who stays calm no matter what, the one who never needs too much, asks too much, or dreams too big, and in return you received approval, validation, temporary peace, but underneath that was a silent trade. Every time you edited yourself to be accepted, you gave up a little piece of who you truly are. And at some point, if you want to be whole, you have to ask, what am I still holding on to that no longer fits the person I'm becoming? It could be a relationship built on roles you no longer want to play. It could be a job that demands your performance, not your present. It could be a belief you inherited, one that made you feel safe, but now makes you feel small. To live authentically, you must be willing to let go of these things, not with resentment, but with reverence. Because they served you. They were part of your survival. But now, you're not here to just survive. You're here to live fully, openly, without constantly negotiating who you are to keep others comfortable. The world often tells you to be yourself, but it doesn't tell you what that costs. It costs comfort, it costs predictability, it costs certain relationships that were only ever meant for a past version of you. When you stop pretending, some people will leave. Not because you did something wrong, but because they were never truly connected to the real you. They were connected to the mask. And once you remove that mask, they no longer recognize you. Or worse, they feel betrayed. But the only betrayal would be choosing to keep wearing it. And yes, it's terrifying to walk away from familiarity, to stand in your truth with no guarantee that anyone will stand with you. But in that sacred solitude, something powerful happens. You begin to hear your own voice again. Not the voice shaped by fear or expectation, but the one that has always been quietly waiting beneath the noise. It doesn't beg to be liked, it doesn't bend to fit, it simply is. Pure, honest, undeniable. That's the foundation of authenticity, not the performance of being real, but the courage to show up without needing to be rehearsed. It's allowing your no to be as valid as your yes. It's trusting your gut even when your mind wants to calculate the outcome. It's making decisions not from fear of losing something, but from a deep loyalty to your inner world. And here's the truth. Not everyone will understand you. Not everyone will like you. But you are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to be understood by yourself. That's the core of everything. Because once you understand and accept your own truth, external validation loses its grip. You stop seeking approval for your existence. You stop performing your life for an audience that doesn't even know your name. The path of authenticity is not about becoming something new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's about shedding layers, not adding them. About releasing, not acquiring. You don't need to add more to yourself, you need to unlearn everything that made you think you weren't enough as you are. Yes, authenticity requires sacrifice, but the trade is always worth it. You might lose people, places, or comfort, but you gain something far more sacred. Your peace, your clarity, your freedom. You gain the right to exist without apology. And when you begin living from that place, when your truth no longer asks for permission, your life begins to reflect something far more beautiful than perfection. It begins to reflect you. One of the most dangerous things you can do in this life is to silence your own voice to make others feel more comfortable. You may think you're keeping the peace, avoiding conflict, maintaining harmony, but what you're really doing is abandoning your essence. You're turning the volume down on your truth, just so someone else doesn't have to feel discomfort. And with every silence, every swallowed word, every moment you pretend to be fine, when you're not, you become a little more disconnected from yourself. This is how people begin to feel hollow, not because they lack purpose or opportunity, but because they've denied their own reality for too long. When your words are censored, when your feelings are buried, when your needs are always at the bottom of the list, a strange thing happens. You lose the ability to trust yourself. You start to question your instincts, to second-guess your perceptions, to wonder if your truth is even valid anymore. That's the tragedy of chronic self-betrayal. It doesn't just break your spirit, it breaks your inner compass. You weren't born to be silent. You weren't born to constantly accommodate and adapt. There is strength in softness, yes, but not when softness becomes surrender. You weren't meant to play a supporting role in your own life just so others can shine. Your voice is not a liability. Your truth is not a threat. But when you suppress it long enough, you start to believe it is. You start to fear your own honesty. You convince yourself that your silence is love, that your suppression is maturity, that your numbness is peace. It's not. It's fear disguised as harmony. There will always be people who benefit from your silence, people who feel safer when you stay small, people who are more comfortable when you don't ask for much, when you don't challenge the status quo, when you keep playing the role you never chose. And if you're not careful, you'll spend your entire life performing for people who never really saw you in the first place. You'll keep shrinking to fit into rooms that were never designed for the full weight of your truth. But here's the reality. Every time you silence yourself, you reinforce the idea that your truth is too much. You tell your nervous system that expression is unsafe. You teach yourself that your needs are secondary. And this becomes a pattern, a blueprint for all your relationships. You wonder why no one really knows you, why you feel unseen, unheard, untouched, in the spaces that are supposed to feel most intimate. It's because you haven't allowed your truth to fully show up in those spaces. You've been managing perception instead of embodying presence. It's not easy to speak your truth. Sometimes it shakes your voice. Sometimes it shakes the room. But let it shake. Let it rattle the comfort zones and expectations that have kept you confined. Because the alternative is worse. The alternative is living in a constant state of internal conflict, where your outer life looks calm, but your inner world is burning with unspoken things. And that fire doesn't die out. It consumes you from the inside. You were not made to be agreeable at the cost of your soul. You were not designed to be emotionally invisible, just so others could feel emotionally comfortable. Your truth is a sacred force. It's not something to be hidden. It's something to be honored, expressed. You have to stop betraying yourself to maintain false peace. Because false peace is nothing but prolonged pain. It's a slow bleed of the soul. Real peace, authentic peace, comes from integrity, when your inner truth and your outer actions are in alignment. When you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, I didn't abandon myself today. Start small. Speak one truth you've been holding back. Set one boundary you've been avoiding. Say no when you mean no. Say yes only when it comes from wholeness, not obligation. Let your truth breathe, even if your voice shakes. Let it take up space, even if it's uncomfortable. Because your truth is not here to decorate the room. It's here to reshape it. You were not born to be silent, you were born to express, to evolve, to awaken. And that begins the moment you decide that your voice is not too much. It's exactly enough. Healing is not found in pretending everything is fine. It is not found in maintaining the illusion that you are untouched, unbothered, unaffected. True healing begins the moment you stop betraying what you feel. The moment you look yourself in the eye, not the version of you that performs, not the one that hides pain with a smile, but the real you, the one you've silenced for too long. The moment you sit with your discomfort instead of distracting from it, that's where the healing begins. Most people think healing is about fixing what's broken. But you are not broken, you are buried beneath layers of silence, people-pleasing, fear, and self-neglect. And every time you betray your truth to fit in, to avoid confrontation, to keep people happy, you add another layer. You bury your authenticity under what's expected of you. You become what the world wants, and in the process, you forget what you want. Healing is the journey back to that forgotten self, the one who remembers, the one who still believes. You can't begin that journey until you stop abandoning yourself in subtle, quiet ways. Not just in the big betrayals, the toxic relationships, the harmful decisions, but in the small daily moments when you say, "I'm fine," when you're really not. When you ignore the gut feeling that something is wrong. When you smile through the pain so no one asks questions. That's not strength. That's survival. And while survival has kept you going, it cannot teach you how to live. Healing does that. To truly heal, you must stop negotiating your worth. You must stop asking the world for permission to feel, to speak, to be. You don't need to justify your pain. You don't need to prove it's real. Your body already knows. Your heart already remembers. The weight you carry isn't imaginary. It's the accumulation of all the times you denied yourself the right to exist fully and freely. You carry the versions of yourself you silenced to make others comfortable. But healing invites those parts back, not to judge them, but to welcome them, to say, "You mattered all along." You don't have to earn healing by being perfect. You don't have to prove you're worthy of peace. You just have to stop running from yourself, that's all. You have to be brave enough to feel what you've avoided, to admit that something hurt, to allow grief to have a voice, to give anger a safe place to land, to let joy in without guilt. Healing is messy like that. It doesn't follow a straight line. It doesn't look pretty, but it's honest. And honesty is the ground where wholeness grows. You will not heal by continuing to betray your needs. You will not find peace by becoming smaller, quieter, easier. You were never meant to heal in hiding. Healing requires presence. It requires that you show up to your pain, to your longings, to your power, not as who you think you should be, but as who you are right now, wounded, wise, worthy. And as you do that, you'll begin to notice something. Your body relaxes when you tell the truth. Your soul exhales when you no longer pretend. Your heart, once guarded and afraid, starts to open again. Not to be hurt, but to be real. That's what healing is. It's not just the absence of pain. It's the return of truth. It's the slow, steady reclamation of all the parts of you that were left behind in moments when you didn't know how to choose yourself. You may have been taught that healing means becoming better, but real healing is about becoming whole. And wholeness requires that you stop dividing yourself into acceptable and unacceptable, strong and weak, lovable and too much. Every part belongs. Every emotion is valid. Every truth, even the ones that tremble on your lips, deserves to be spoken. If you want to heal, start by listening. Listen to what you've been ignoring. Listen to the ache beneath your silence. Listen to the anger you keep swallowing. Listen to the dreams you've dismissed. Healing doesn't ask you to have all the answers. It only asks you to stop pretending you're fine when you're not. To stop betraying yourself in the name of survival, because you're not here just to survive. You're here to live, to love, to breathe without fear, to speak without shame, to stand in the truth of who you are, and finally, call that enough. That's where healing lives, in the choice to come home to yourself again. There is a moment in your life, quiet but unmistakable, when you realize that the world you've built no longer feels like home. The job you chased, the relationships you nurtured, the identity you wore like armor, none of it feels like you anymore. And that realization, though painful, is sacred. It's the turning point The moment you stop performing and start remembering, the moment you realize that reclaiming your life means reclaiming your truth. And you can't do that until you stop betraying the very person you were born to be. Your life doesn't change just because time passes. It changes when you do, when you make different choices from a deeper place of self-respect, when you stop making decisions out of fear, fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of discomfort, and start making them out of clarity, because clarity is powerful. It doesn't always offer comfort, but it gives you direction. And direction is what you need when you finally decide to stop betraying yourself. But self-reclamation is not an overnight process. It begins with small, deliberate acts. It starts when you say no, even when it would be easier to say yes. It starts when you leave the room instead of staying and pretending. When you cancel the call, take the day, pause the performance. It begins when you choose silence over explanation, stillness over approval, truth over peacekeeping. That's how you rebuild your relationship with yourself, one choice at a time. Every time you honor your inner knowing, you build trust with yourself. And that trust becomes the foundation of everything else. Your confidence, your clarity, your peace. Because the reason so many people feel lost is not because they don't have goals or ambitions, but because they're disconnected from the truth of who they are. They've handed their decisions to others. They've outsourced their identity to culture, to family, to fear, and now they're living a life that might look full on the outside, but feels painfully empty within. You cannot feel whole while abandoning your soul. You cannot build a life you love while building it on top of self-betrayal. At some point, the pressure becomes unbearable, not from the world, but from within. The real you begins to knock, gently at first, then louder, through anxiety, through fatigue, through restlessness. That's your spirit reminding you, this isn't it. This isn't who you are. But the beauty of life is this. You can always begin again. You can choose a new story, a new path, a new way of being. You can re-enter your life with different eyes and a different heart, one that refuses to settle for performance, one that is tired of playing roles and ready to live raw, honest, and whole. And no, it won't be easy. Speaking your truth will disrupt things. People will question you. They may even leave. But what's worse? Being misunderstood by others or remaining a stranger to yourself? When you reclaim your truth, you reclaim your power. You start to move differently. You start to choose people who feel safe, not just familiar. You stop justifying your boundaries. You stop apologizing for needing space, for taking time, for not being who others expect you to be. You begin to live from your core, not from fear, not from obligation, but from alignment. And alignment brings peace. Not the kind of peace that requires silence, but the kind that brings freedom. The kind where you can finally breathe, finally rest, finally look in the mirror and say, there you are, I've missed you. Because that's what self-betrayal steals most. The relationship you have with yourself. It fractures it, weakens it, and makes you feel like you need others to fill in what's been lost. But the truth is, everything you need is already inside you. It just got buried under years of noise, shame, and survival. Choose yourself again, in quiet ways, in loud ways, in ways that feel uncomfortable but liberating. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait until it's perfect. Just begin. Begin by saying what you mean, by leaving what drains you, by returning to what lights you up. That is the beginning of your real life. The one that doesn't require masks or performances or constant compromise. You are not here to betray your soul just to fit in. You are here to become fully, unapologetically, and completely who you truly are. And the world may not be ready for that, but you are. Self-loyalty is one of the most radical things you can practice in a world that constantly asks you to compromise who you are. It is not loud, but it is powerful. It doesn't look like rebellion. It looks like choosing yourself, quietly and relentlessly, in the moments that matter most, when everyone else wants something from you, when the pressure is to conform. Please, adjust. Perform self-loyalty says, not this time, not at the cost of my soul. Many people go through life being loyal to everyone but themselves. They keep promises they never agreed to. They show up for others in ways they've never shown up for themselves. They tolerate, accommodate, and adapt until there's nothing left of their own voice, and then they wonder why they feel so tired, so invisible, so resentful. It's not because they're weak, it's because they've forgotten how to be loyal to the one person who matters most, themselves. True self-loyalty is not selfishness. It is not arrogance or self-centeredness. It is the deep recognition that your life belongs to you, that your peace is your responsibility, that your needs, your emotions, your boundaries are sacred, and that betraying them, even for noble reasons, comes with a cost you can no longer afford if you want to live whole and free. You've spent too much time waiting for someone else to choose you, to validate your voice, to make you feel enough. But self-loyalty is the moment you stop waiting. It's the day you realize, I don't need to be chosen if I already choose myself. I don't need to be seen if I already refuse to hide. I don't need to be accepted if I already accept the truth of who I am. But here's the paradox. Choosing yourself will sometimes feel like loss. You may lose people who only loved the version of you that kept quiet. You may walk away from roles that earned you praise but cost you your peace. You may leave behind identities that were built on your ability to endure pain without complaint. And when that happens, you'll be tempted to go back, to shrink, to people-please, to betray yourself just one more time for the sake of comfort or connection. Because what you gain in return is far greater than anything you lose. You gain self-respect, the kind that no one can give you and no one can take away. You gain a relationship with yourself that's rooted in truth, not performance. You gain the quiet power of knowing that you will not abandon yourself, no matter what the world demands. That's what it means to be loyal to yourself. It means refusing to gaslight your own pain just because others don't understand it. It means protecting your peace even if it makes you unpopular. It means saying, I matter, even when it feels selfish. It means not needing others to agree with your boundaries in order to uphold them. It means giving yourself the love you've always been giving away. And it's not always glamorous. Sometimes it looks like resting when there's work to do, saying no when you can't give more, walking away from a conversation that doesn't honor you, unfollowing people who trigger the part of you that still believes you're not enough. It looks like silence, solitude, stillness, things the world often mistakes for weakness, but which are, in fact, the foundation of strength. Because only a strong person can be loyal to themselves in a world that benefits from their self-abandonment. If you feel like you're betraying yourself just to belong, ask, is it really belonging if it requires me to be someone I'm not? If you feel like you're being drained by your own kindness, ask, is it really kindness if it costs me my peace? If you feel like you're constantly performing, ask, what would happen if I stopped pretending and just let myself be real, the answers might scare you, but they'll also set you free. You were never meant to live at war with yourself. You were meant to live in loyalty to your soul. And the day you stop betraying that soul, one choice, one boundary, one truth at a time, is the day your real life begins. Choose yourself, not once, not occasionally, but every single time. Because the more loyal you are to your truth, the more powerful your life becomes. When you stop betraying yourself, you don't just feel better, you begin to move differently. The way you walk into a room changes. The way you look at yourself in the mirror changes. The way you make decisions without fear, without guilt, without the need for approval, changes. You start to embody a quiet power, a grounded presence, a clarity that can't be faked or borrowed. Because something fundamental has shifted. You're no longer negotiating your worth. You're no longer asking the world for permission to be who you are. This is the transformation that comes from choosing self-trust over self-abandonment. The transformation that happens not in grand declarations, but in the small, consistent choices you make every single day. You stop entertaining conversations that drain your spirit. You stop showing up in places that require you to shrink. You stop making yourself digestible just so you don't seem too much. You begin, instead, to walk with the knowing that you are already enough, not because someone said so, but because you no longer need them to. The way you carry yourself becomes a reflection of your alignment. You no longer over-explain. You no longer apologize for existing, for needing space, for saying no. There is a calm strength in you now, not born from arrogance, but from integration. You've made peace with the parts of yourself you used to hide. You no longer need to convince others of your value, because you've stopped convincing yourself that you are in. This internal shift spills into every part of your life. Relationships become clearer. You can now recognize who genuinely respects you and who only stayed because you kept betraying your own needs for their comfort. And with that clarity, you let go, not with resentment, but with reverence. You no longer cling to what costs you your peace. You no longer chase love that demands your silence. You've remembered something vital. That connection without authenticity is not intimacy, it's performance. And you're done performing. You also begin to speak differently. Your words are not sharper, but they are firmer. You speak less to be liked and more to be true. You say what you mean. You ask for what you need. You express your feelings not as an apology, but as a natural act of being alive. Your communication is no longer driven by the fear of being misunderstood. It's driven by the desire to be real, even if it makes others uncomfortable. And with that honesty comes freedom. Even your solitude changes. It no longer feels like loneliness, it feels like homecoming. Because you've stopped running from yourself. You've stopped needing distractions to avoid the silence. Now, in your own company, you feel safe, you feel whole, you feel seen. Not because the world sees you, but because you finally do. You become the kind of person who no longer rushes their healing. You no longer chase quick fixes or hollow affirmations. You let your truth unfold, layer by layer. You hold space for your grief, your joy, your rage, your softness. You stop labeling your emotions as good or bad, and instead you meet them with presence. This is what it means to live in harmony with yourself. This is what it means to stop betraying your own humanity. And as you embody this version of you, the one who no longer abandons their truth, you become magnetic. Not because you're trying to attract anything, but because your energy is clean. You are no longer leaking power, trying to be accepted. You are no longer hiding pieces of yourself to maintain false peace. You are whole. You are present. You are powerful without needing to prove it. This is the ultimate reward of stopping self-betrayal. Not the approval of others, not a perfect life, but the unshakable peace that comes from knowing you are living in integrity. The calm that comes from knowing you won't abandon yourself again. The strength that comes from honoring your truth even when it's inconvenient, even when it's hard. You begin to walk not with pride, but with purpose, not with force, but with certainty, not with the need to be seen, but with the knowing that your presence is enough, that your truth matters, that your life, when lived from the inside out, is a sacred expression of who you really are. And from that place, everything changes, not all at once, but undeniably, irreversibly, beautifully. You become the person who is no longer afraid to take up space, to be seen, to be heard, to be real. And that is a power the world cannot give you and will never be able to take away. The journey to stop betraying yourself is not about perfection or grand gestures. It's about the quiet, daily commitment to honor your own truth above all else. It's choosing yourself when it feels easier to give in. It's standing firm in your boundaries when the world pressures you to bend. It's embracing your whole self, even the parts that feel messy, vulnerable, or uncomfortable, and refusing to turn away. When you do this, you reclaim the power that was never truly lost, but only misplaced in the quest for approval and acceptance. You awaken to a life lived with integrity, freedom, and deep inner peace. This is not just self-respect, it is self-revolution. And it begins now, the moment you decide to be loyal to the one person you can never betray without losing yourself, you.